All right. Good morning, everybody. This is Stephen. Welcome back. I hope and trust that everyone had a good weekend. And I'm here because it is my intention. I want to keep my word. When I said that my intention would be to come on here and drop content on a weekly basis. So last week I started that process, uh, mostly in terms of the first two videos that I put out there. If you have not had a chance to review those, go ahead and have a look. In those videos, you can compare what my SD voice was like sometime after my diagnosis back in 2019. And in that video, that was actually a good day. Okay, on my worst days and my bad days, many days I had nothing to produce. And even when I did, it sounded much worse than it did on that video that I posted. And so watch those just to give you some context of where I have been and where I am now, obviously. And so in today's video, just to shift, we want to ask the main question in my mind, right? So in terms of trying to solve an issue, in terms of trying to solve a problem, I think one of the biggest things and obvious things that we do is like, what is the issue, right? And so with spasmodic dysphonia or SD, the obvious question in my mind is what the heck is SD? And so in terms of trying to get well myself, that was one of the first things I wanted to know and understand. Um, and I think at this point I have a very good understanding of what SD is. I'm not going to sit here and claim that I know everything, but I know enough. I believe at this point, obviously, I've done some things to walk myself out of that pit. And so that first question, what the heck is SD? And then the second question in my mind would be, how do we fix it? Or how do we get things back on a strengthening path that will result in vocal health and speaking ease, right, in a short amount of time or a reasonable amount of time. And so short is relative, reasonable is relative. So we're all different. And so I don't like to put time frames around things of this nature. But I do believe when we know what to do, that we can see some good changes in a relatively short space. So with those two questions, I want to I would like to share an illustration with you that I've done around voice. And we could talk about that real fast and then jump into some closing points, right? And that'll be all for today. So let me give the illustration that I have. I have a photo that I put together here, or an illustration. And so the question, what is SD? And so before we can say or answer what is SD, I think we first need to understand, like, what is a voice. And so in my opinion, okay, I'm not a doctor or scientist, but what I have done is I have studied these things, and in understanding them and in doing practices, I've put my voice back together. So what I've learned from observation and experience is that your voice is an intersection, and that intersection is comprised of physical, emotional, okay, and identity-based components. Right here, physical, emotional, and identity-based components. And so those are the things that I think make a voice. And I like this picture because, obviously there are more than three chains or three links in this chain. And so there could be other components, there could be other factors. But I think based on what I've learned and what I've been able to piece back together, these are the three big components that come to mind when I think about voice. And so that allows us to then pivot and ask the question, what then has happened when a person has SD? So many times there could be, and this is documented not only in with the individuals that I've asked questions of, but I believe this is well documented, is that many times there is a physical component or interruption that takes place, attributes affecting the physical health of your voice. And so in my case, it was a viral infection. I had the flu. And then in addition to some emotional trauma components and around that same time, and usually this is something that's very common. These are two of the factors that are very, very common coming together around the time that a person develops SD. And so other physical influences, I've heard caffeine. Obviously, there could be laryngitis, I've heard as a contributing component in many cases. I'm trying to think, and you might have other ones. So post that in the comments section so that we can continue to learn and expand on our knowledge base. But of course, physical components, physical influences or factors that have come into play that have challenged the ability to make good speech. Okay, and then next to physical, we have emotional. We have emotional components. This is a big one. Many of the cases that I have learned about in reaching out to individuals and individuals then reaching back out to me, and we're chatting and having discussions, whether that be in a voice chat or text chat. And without, most of the time, without fail, I could tell you that there was, in many of the cases, a, a huge emotional component that was introduced around the time of the SD. Many times it was dramatic, as was the case with me. And then, you have that emotional, traumatic component. You have that combined with the physical component. And then over time, you have a breakdown in your ability to produce your voice like it should be. And so, last but not least, there's another factor. We get into identity. Okay, and within identity, you have personality components, you have confidence components. These are also components that are visible in terms of producing speech. How fast you come out of the gate. Is there any hesitancy in your process? Is that hesitancy a result of the fact that you now have difficulty in doing speech? Or was it something that was part of your personality ahead of when you develop SD? These are all things that we look at in terms of getting well. Now, I know that as I was working to recover my voice and get better, sometimes I was confused. I was like, am I not able to do this because of SD, or is this not a place where I would interject? Um, just from a personality standpoint, the lines become very blurred. I mean, you don't know if you're not performing because that's just not you. You don't know if it's SD that is holding you back. And so, really understanding your identity and really getting to the place where you do not have a performance based mindset in any way would be a huge component in helping you break out of the dysfunctional loop, spasmodic dysphonia. Okay, and so these are the components that I look at when I'm looking at a case of SD. And the reason, many folks were like, hey, man, go ahead and post the tips and different things you've done. Go ahead and post your hack or your fix or whatever. And the reason that I cannot do that in mass is because we're all different. Now, where the scale tips on these three things for each individual is different. And so that needs to be that needs to be taken into account when I come up with a treatment intervention. Okay, so what I like to do is ask questions of an individual so I can see where this is tipping. Does that make sense? I hope that it does. Okay, so that is really what I wanted to cover on today. I want you to understand what a healthy voice is in terms of these three main components. And then in understanding what SD is a breakdown of one or more of these three components. And in addition, it is losing the ability to manage these in a way where we can still produce a viable voice. Okay, so just to give you some tip here on what I'm doing when I ask these questions, there are certain things that are particularly hard to do when SD is present. Many people would have difficulty making phone calls, others had going to the drive-through. And so one of the things that I do just to gauge the emotional piece is I have individuals go through a drive-through. And so instead of going ahead and placing your order, many times those with SD, we go up to a drive-through. When we're there, we had it real bad, and you would feel the panic attack coming up, the anticipation of having to project your voice over to that speaker. And of course, if you had SD, that is very difficult to do. So as I began to get past things, one of the things that I did was to to understand what was going on with me from an emotional and panic perspective. I would just drive up to the drive-through window, and instead of ordering, I would just kind of sit there and notice and understand what was going on with me from an emotional standpoint. And what did I notice? I noticed that I was in a panic attack. SD, by and large, for most individuals that I've encountered, matter of fact, everybody that I have interacted with on chat to this point can attest that when I make them aware of this, that there is a panic process that is going on when it's time to speak. And so in that drive-through scenario, what I began to do to get past that was I would go to the drive-through window, I would wait for the attendant to ask me what I needed. And instead of trying to order my food, I would sit there, notice my body, notice that I would become anxious, heart rates up, can't breathe right. These are all indications of panic. So I began to just go there instead of ordering, take a deep breath, relax myself, and then drive off. Yes, I did. That is exactly right. I would go to the drive-through window. I would wait for the attendant to ask me what I wanted, and then I would relax myself and drive away. And then what do you know? After some time, I don't remember how many times I had to do that, maybe somewhere between 5 and 10 times. I don't remember the exact number. But an amazing thing started to happen. I would do this exercise, and then all of a sudden, in doing it, I did not feel the emotional distress. My heart didn't jump out of my shirt anymore. I wasn't short of breath anymore. And I had enough wits about myself to sit there and go ahead and attempt to make an order. Now, my voice wasn't everything it needed to be immediately following the release from the panic process, but it was a whole lot better. And so, in putting things back together, we do it one step at a time. And I believe the biggest and first piece, if you do have the panic process in your talking attempts, is to eliminate that. This is one exercise that I do. There are others based on the individual and based on the things that give you most of your problems. We look at that and then we tailor something to you based on what gives you most difficulty. So that is an example of the types of interventions that I do. I want to go ahead and give you that here. But in terms of an individual. We can't give just a mass prescription here because we're all different. But that is an example. I hope you can use that. Okay, so I've covered what I think I wanted to cover today. Next time we talk, we are going to jump into some of the physical things. We're gonna discuss the physical component in more detail. And with that, I want to give you some tips around what you can do to enhance your physical health related to your voice box, related to speaking. Okay, so so I was very happy to jump on here today and share with you guys. Um, I hope this is helping you. I hope that you are beginning to see how all this fits together to understand the pieces, because understanding SD is the biggest piece in being able to get it well. And then understanding yourself and how you fit, right, on that scale of physical, emotional, and identity components that inform your voice. And when those things are off, those things also inform SD. Okay, again, this is Stephen Jones. I thank you that you were able to join me here today. Please, please subscribe to the channel. If you have any comments, negative comments, positive comments, I don't care. I hope mostly positive comments, of course, but any comments, any feedback, any thoughts, observations, realizations that come in your mind as a result of watching this, please post that in the comments section of the video. And until then, I will talk with some of you during the week on chats. You can reach out on the Facebook page, SD Free. In addition, you can find me in most of the major Spasmodic Dysphonia pages on Facebook. I'm in other groups as well. You can reach me there, ask a question. You can instant message me on Facebook as well. I'm working with many individuals there. Okay, so you guys have a great week. Be encouraged, and as we say, know that SD is beatable. I will talk with you soon.